I'm live. Miserable day in North London, stuck at home, bored, which is dangerous for an alcoholic. But luckily, I've got all those years behind me, and give me fuel, and I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. But it's kind of picking up on recent events. Uh, yeah, it's just big book study nonsense. I wouldn't be making a fuss about this if it wasn't for the fact that I've met many people who struggled and suffered because of it, and there's every possibility that at least one person has died because of it, simply because of being totally misdirected and misguided. You know, guaranteed if you ask an alcoholic if they understand something, they'll say yes just to please you. Do we all identify with that? Pretty much. And then they don't come back. So it's very, very serious. It's very serious indeed. What was it? 1934, 35? 35 Bill, mate, Bob. Prior to that, there was other stuff going on, which was Eden Hazard. Yeah, that was his name, Eden Hazard. He was a he was a rich businessman. Or at least his father owned a big business, and he was part of it. And so he was a wealthy young guy, and he developed a drink problem. And he went over to Carl Jung. So that's how wealthy he was. In those days, he was supposed to just jump on a plane. It was a ship across the Atlantic. And he stayed with Jung, and Jung taught him and talked to him about his condition and all of that stuff. So I'm not sure, but he stayed a reasonable length of time. And off he came back home. By the time he got off the boat, he was drunk. Right. So they sent him back, and he went through all this stuff, and he had some sort of awakening. And he came back, and everything was okay. So he decided to go to, I think it was the Oxford group. And it was at the Oxford group that he bumped into another player in this theme leading up to Bill W. and Dr. Bob. And that was a guy called Ebbie Thatcher. In fact, I think Roland became Ebbie's sponsor. It was a Christian group, wasn't it? The Washingtonians, perhaps, or a takeoff from the Washingtonians. But yeah, and so there it goes. And Ebbie, in one of his spiritual highs, which I think he had many of them because he was a relapser, Ebbie got something from this talk with Roland stuff. And he went back to Bob to tell Bob all about it. And then Bob's story. Bob, Bill, Bill and Bob. Fucking mixing up my Bills and Bobs. Ebbie was a pal of Bill's, a drinking buddy. So Ebbie decided that his buddy Bill had to find out about this. So Ebbie went to Bill's, tells you in Bill's story. And Bill got something from it. Seems got a lot from it. Although at the time he couldn't be bothered, he just wanted a drink. But Ebbie wasn't drinking, he'd found the religion, you know. And from that inspired Bob to an experience. Yeah, he describes the experience. And that's when it started. That's when it started to evolve. He knew Dr. Bob, so he got in touch with Dr. Bob. He was in the hospital. There was a situation in the hospital, and he had a spiritual experience in the hospital. and he discovered that he had to share it with somebody. He was off on a business trip in a hotel and he was under pressure, so he picked up the phone and phoned Dr. Bob. I went to see Dr. Bob. It transpires Dr. Bob had a drink problem as well. Isn't that fascinating? Living miles and miles apart from each other. Probably you would never have bet that they would have met each other. But bang, there you go. So that's the beginning of it. Bill and Bob. There's something working here, isn't there? There's something helping here, something assisting, something spiritual, something inspiring, spirit to inspire. That's a nice definition of the word. I like that. And it kind of started with Eddie Roland Hazard. I said Aiden Hazard at the beginning, didn't I? He's a football player. Good football player. Roland Hazard, his name was. Get a grip, John. Dear. You got to laugh. You really got to laugh. 67 years of age and talking like somebody's 90. With all due respect to people who are 90. Oh, dear. Anyway, yes, so it's Roland Hazard. So there you go. Oh, so many things happening. So many things. So coincidences becomes too much after a while. There's no such thing as coincidence. And here's Bill and Bob, summer of 35, and that's when it all kicks off, and it all starts developing. Now there's 4 years, at least 4 years. 1939, they put the book together. Started in 38, finished in 39, and so there's not that much time in between, and that's when all these ideas were developing for this program and what it was going to be and all of that stuff. I'd love to have been there at that time. I'd love to have been there at that time. I think I would have been inspired as well. I think anybody would have been inspired. Somebody who was looking for a spiritual experience and didn't know they were looking for it. You know, that's why it's so sudden. Oh. So there you go. Bill and Bob together. And 4 years, 4 years, setting up meetings and going to meetings and talking at meetings and talking about this, that, and the next thing, and eventually building up what was to become the program, 12-step recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've got a bad habit of not referring to the book. You see? Don't know why. But anyway, it's approximately that time span. It's not that particularly important either. 39, the book comes out. And they managed to get it printed, even though they were skinned. Then he went to see Rockefeller or somebody, one of those rich guys. And he says, I won't give you anything because that would just cause you problems, but whatever else, da. So that was a disappointment because they were out trying to sell this thing. Billet seems to envisage making a fortune out of the book. So there you go. That's the start of AA. Setting up meetings. Big book. People reading the big book. It's fine. We go to meetings. I don't know what rate it was going relative to the number of members of AA because it started to take off as well. And remember, this is all during this war thing. You remember that? Don't forget the Second World War was going on. And so there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on in the early 40s as well. And soldiers and stuff and horrors of war. And these guys are promoting this 12-step recovery program. It's quite remarkable. Quite remarkable. And everything's kind of fine. Yeah. Well, Bill, in the early 50s, he brings out a book, As Bill Sees It. No, it wasn't As Bill Sees It. It was a 12 and 12. 12 steps in the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the story goes that the reason why he left it, he'd actually written this book years before. Correct me if I'm wrong. But out of respect to Dr. Bob, because Bob wasn't happy about it. Bob wasn't happy about it, and rightly so. And rightly so. You know, because people started using that as the book of recovery. Although even in the foreword, it states there, AA states that it's an interpretive commentary of the 12-step recovery program by a co-founder. But who reads the foreword? I suggest you do read it. I suggest you do. Kind of puts it into perspective. Talking about the original text, the big book. That's where you go. They're advising that in the 12 and 12. So this is not the program, basically. Kind of disclaimer. But it's in the foreword, so how can I read the foreword? So there you go. That was an error. Bob published that after Dr. Bob died. I believe it was just with respect to Dr. Bob. And there you go. So everybody thought, hey, this is, hey, Bill W. Wow, wow, wow. Bill's a bit of a hero, Bill's a bit of a wow. Heavenly creature. And, so they picked up on this 12 and 12. Now, obviously, I wasn't alive in those days. I was alive in the early 50s. Yeah, I was born in 53, wasn't I? Yeah, born in 53. So he took off and all the problems and whatever else, and pop stars, movie stars who were the big thing at the time, they were going about shouting and bawling about, yeah, this is brilliant, hey, I've not drank for this. And then the next week they were found lying in Hollywood Boulevard, drunk, so we have to protect us. And another good reason for writing the book, to protect it. It's in writing, it's in stone. This is it. This is how we seen it. We are the pioneers of this stuff. We created this program. We created the book. And that's all we needed at the time, and that's all we needed. And they used it all the way through. Until the late 50s, there was a hint of what was going wrong. When, I don't know, I think it was Bill W., but that's basically, it's a statement I remember. When I remember statements, because my memory's got a memory like a hen, with all due respect to hens, my memory's just but when it comes to stuff like that, I remember it reasonably well. And what was it? It said sobriety, freedom from alcohol, through the practice and teachings of the 12-step recovery program is the sole purpose of an AA meeting. Well, why would they write that? That's a warning. That's a reminding people this is what it's all about. Through the practice and teachings of a 12-step recovery program. Wow. The book is there. It's a book of instruction, as it says, with all due respect to wee Laurie over in Chelmsford or wherever he lives. Laurie reckoned that it's just a guy who's 30 odd years sober and he's an ex journalist, man of words. And he gets upset when I describe it as a book of instruction. He insists that it's a book of suggestions, angry me face, And I'm still quite intimidated by confrontation, so I kind of. But one night I was at a meeting and he jumps in. It's not a book of instruction; it's a book of suggestions. And then it came to me to ask. Well, okay then, if it's a book of suggestions, what's the suggestion? It's suggesting you follow the clear-cut, precise instructions. Ergo, it's a book of instructions. So, there you go, Laurie. And this is the kind of stuff that I'm bumping into in 2020, 2018, whatever it was. And they recognised that. They recognised that in the late 50s. So we're going to have to tell them something, but we can't tell them because they won't be told, because they're spoiled brats, they're adult children. So there we go, we put it up as a kind of a hint, a suggestion, a reminder through the practice and teaching. And the reason why is because things were going wrong. They were all off doing their own thing. And there was, in America at that time, there was psychotherapy and all that. Therapists became very popular. And the Hazeldine book came out as well. They jumped on the bandwagon with this stuff. And it was very popular. So there's money to be made. Money. The root to all evil. So that was the warning that they gave because it was going wrong. And that's the tragedy of AA. And this was 60 years ago. It's not getting any better. It's got worse. It's got worse. And I know that through 27 years of taking people through this program. And it's got to be very simple if I'm taking them through it. Trust me, because I'm no intellectual. Yeah, I'm no intellectual. And but I can manage to do it because it's clear, concise instructions. I can do it. Then you get these people just to confuse them. So my point is that the pioneers of this program, inspired by God, because it's hard to imagine they'd done it by themselves, spoiled children, spoiled brats, but they managed to get it together and agree. And they'd done it within a very short period of time. And it's just astonishing. It's just, wow, wait a minute, there's something here. This is inspirational. This is in spirit, inspirational. So I call that God. They were inspired by God. Yep. 20 years later, they're having to put up warnings, subtle warnings, because it's going wrong, because the adult children are taking over and start to do their own thing with it. Probably inevitable. But the tragedy of it is that the victims, they die. They die. Have you ever seen anybody dying of alcoholism? It's quite shocking. Quite shocking. In the States, they get themselves in the way, the body just withers away and just snuffed out. That's the horrors of alcoholism. And the wet brain, I've witnessed that. An uncle of mine, my family's seeped, soaked in alcoholism. I had an uncle who had a wet brain, and he just walked about like a zombie. And shocking, shocking. Here they are warning us: sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the practice and teachings of a 12-step recovery program is the sole purpose of an AA meeting. Right, okay. What's come to the fore, perhaps come to the fore, is this big book study. And I've got first hand experience of it because I eventually met the man. And I asked him for help. He said, I'll have to get in touch with my sponsor. But he's a bit difficult to get in touch with because he's in Canada and America. And he travels about. All right, what kind of sponsors that? Yeah. And I swear I waited 8 months for that man. And I couldn't understand why he just couldn't do it. But I waited and I waited. And eventually took me through the program. It now possibly transpires that the reason why he was putting it off is because I was so aggressive. I didn't know I was that aggressive. And that people were intimidated by me. And perhaps he was intimidated by me. Not sure, not sure. But anyway, right, okay, good. Right, let's go. I've already tried 2 so-called sponsors who were dangerous. Poles apart, opposites of each other, but they're still equally as dangerous, you know. And so I'm ready for the man, ready to go for whatever it is I've got to go for. I've listened to Joe Charlie, yeah, good stuff. And he hits me with a low blow. He tells me I've got to study the book. before I do the steps. Or I couldn't get that. What's that all about? I'd never heard of it before. This is going back 27 years. 1993, 93. Yeah. And I was stunned, shocked, went cold, my blood ran cold. Study? What do you mean study? I didn't have a clue. And I tried it and I couldn't do it. And then I phoned other people and said, nah, you got to do it. But eventually, God knows how much longer that took. And all this time, my life's a risk. Since the first day I've walked into AA, my life has been a risk. When I should be getting help, should be looking forward to recovery. That's not been happening. This is now 18 months after I've come into AA. And eventually I go to his house and he takes me through the steps and finding everything I show you, you'll find in the book, which was pretty accurate, you know. And that was me. I had my spiritual experience, which I did have. It was quite remarkable feeling. And everything I was reassured because I saw it in the book. Though I didn't put too much importance on that. I just wanted to get there. Typical alcoholic. I want to get there. I don't want to see the scenery or whatever. I just want to get to that station. Boom, there you go. And I remember the spiritual experience, and that was fascinating. So here we are back to this situation where people, this study thing, almost just gave up. And if I'd given up at that point, I'd have gone back drinking again. God knows where I'd have ended up. And this is whilst I'm in AA for 18 months. And I've got a man who's 10 or 11 years sober at the time sponsoring me, a very spiritual man. And he's telling me to do this. Truly and utterly shocking. Since that time, I've taken many people through this program, and it's not unusual to find people who have done the Big Book study and how it's laid out and how you do it. And you do some of them were talking about doing the steps in the group. Where did that happen? Where did that come from? And the question is, where does it all come from? Because it doesn't come from the pioneers. Clear-cut, precise instructions and a time scale. Launch out in the course of vigorous action. Returning home. You've been somewhere. Yeah, and then dun. When you look at it, when you add it all up, depending on how long it takes you to recognise steps 1 and 2, depends on how long it's going to take you, because after that, it only takes you 2 days. If you'd ask me, are you powerless? What do you mean? When you want to stop, can you? No. When you start, can you control the amount you drink? Guarantee when you finish? No. That's the first paragraph on chapter 4. And that paragraph is summing up the previous 3 chapters, which is all about the alcoholic, recognising that you're an alcoholic. So there you go. If he'd asked me those questions, right, fine, no problem. I do that with people. I ask them those 2 questions. Most of them don't need the first 3 chapters. If they'll get any doubts, say, right, go and read those 3 chapters and come back to me. Rarely did that happen. I'm talking hundreds of people, by the way. Hundreds of people. There was something going on in my life. And so there you go. I'm powerless. I need a power. People in the book discover a power. That's just keeping it very basic and very simple. The people in the book discover a power. Do you want to follow their path? How long is it going to take? Most alcoholics are interested in how long it's going to take, typical alkies. And it's going to take 2 days. Is that it? But these people in the rooms tell me it takes forever. The step 4's a nightmare, a torment. Yeah, but they're wrong. All right, okay, fair enough. And they are wrong. They are totally wrong. This is outside this big book study stuff. What you hear in those rooms about this program, they make it out that step four is a nightmare. It's a toil. And no, it's not. It's very simple and it's quite exciting. Watch step one, and I practice these steps every day. Well, if that's the case, you're doing it wrong, pal. Sorry to tell you this. I've been practicing these steps for 30 years. You've wasted your time. You need a drink. Oh, right, fair enough. Like Laurie in Colchester or Chelmsford. He needs a drink. Mm. Sounds a bit harsh, but it's true. Because you let these people hang about the rooms to cause a lot of damage. That's why AA is in the state it's in, by allowing these people to hang about the rooms and develop their own opinions. Alcoholics free to develop their own opinions. Not right at all. Totally wrong. That's why it's in the state it's in. That's why AA is in the state it's in. So I launch out this course of vigorous action. Right, chapter 5. There is a solution, I believe. And first step of which is a moral inventory. I didn't know what moral meant. What does moral mean? I asked the man. Because I trusted him, I didn't mind showing him my ignorance, which is quite nice. And the moral truth, just look for the truth about things. I said, all right, okay. They show you how to lay it out in the registers. Or he showed me how to lay it out, the 3 columns, A4 page, column 2 inches in from the left, 2 inches in from the right, and a column down the centre, line across the top, in the top left hand bar, Iris in the middle, the cause, and in the right hand, part of me affected. 5 lines down for each name, because you're not writing the whole story about it, just writing little words and little sentences that remind you, because you're going to be talking about it afterwards. All right, okay. I mean, I heard about people writing out whole stories about one person, you know. And, by the time they get to the second or third, they're done. And typical alcoholics are there, because they're not convinced. They're having doubts. So I started writing down the names, and then there's the institutions, and then there's the principles. What's a principle? What's a principle? It's a rule in life that you don't like. All right, okay. You got to do this, you got to do that, yeah. You got to obey the speed limit, yeah, sure. You've got to buy this, you've got to pay for this, and you've got to insure your car. I use car quite often. You've got to MOT your car, yeah, sure. You've got to have decent time, yeah, sure. That's for everybody else, not for me. Yeah. And that was the truth, actually, when I got my first car. Good grief. And they were just like toys to me. They were just like toys to me. I had no, what is this about insurance? What that rubbish, And I just had no idea. No idea. So, shocking, isn't it? So there you go. I've then got my people out of the institutions, principles. I discuss it with a man. And we point out some of the rubbish that's in it and some of the justification and excuses. Always again the excuse. But, never mind the but. So let's look for this. And at the end of it, I've got a list of people who have harmed me, people who have acted towards me, and people who have reacted towards me. Well, that's a start, because I didn't have a clue. But now I'm starting to realise. So he acted towards me just because, just not a nice person. Yeah. Somebody bumps into you in the street and starts arguing with you. I would tear myself apart about something like that. What did I do? I couldn't just say, the guy's a nutter. I didn't have that ability to do that. So here I am. I'm now seeing the difference between who's acted and who's reacted. And if you read it, it says, right, okay, you have a look at the people, right, not nice people, da da da. You might have to pray for them. Okay, fine. But setting that aside, let's go on with the ones who've reacted towards it. Resolutely looking for our part. What was my mistake? What was my mistake? Whom have I harmed? It's all in the book. It's all in the book. All right, so I'm looking at these people I'm now discovering the people who've reacted towards me. Right, okay, this is big stuff now. So if I hadn't done this, no. If I hadn't done that, no. A guy I know, Paul, he told me a story about a friend of his when he got sober, and this guy kept winding him up about his drunken stupids and wanting to embarrass himself and all that stuff, da 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 da. And he couldn't help it. He couldn't work it out. And I think I'd just gone through it. And I don't know, but anyway, there was a suggestion that maybe the reason why he keeps reminding you is because he's resentful. So if you go and make amends to him, that'll take that resentment away. And lo and behold, he went and made amends to him. And the guy stopped doing it. Which was really powerful stuff because it really wound him up when he was going to parties or whatever, or getting together. He would always remind him of his stuff. And now, there you go. So that's a powerful example. Small example, but it's a powerful example of how this stuff works. So you've got this. You end up with this list, and you go through the list with the help of the man and point it out. Right, okay, that's right, okay. What else have I got to deal with? You got to deal with your fears, what you're fearful of. All right, stuff. Not just my fears. No, everybody has fears, but what are you fearful of? Is it rational or is it irrational? I don't like flying in planes. It's pretty rational. Quite a lot of people don't like flying in planes because if anything happens, it's the end of the world. Boom, say goodbye. Kiss your ass goodbye, as my American friends would say. Not that I've got any American friends. I'll have to work on that one. So there you go. Now, and I'm looking for now, having done that, I'm looking for my fears, sexual conduct, whatever comes up in that, fears, feelings of resentment and causing people harm and whatnot, which is pretty regular in this business. That's it. That brings us to page 75, 76. Returning home. I've been somewhere. Yeah, you've been to the man's house, haven't you? You have. Fine. And I take down the book and I look through it, check out everything. You okay? Any problems? Phone up the man, talk to him about it. Right, fine. And there's a time scale coming into it now. Yeah. When I talk to people that you can have this program in 2 days, a la Clarence Snyder, they just rubbish it. It takes longer than I. Oh, you can't do that. Yeah. There's wee Jimmy from, I can't remember where he's from. You got to love wee Jimmy. He's a wee guy, a wee Glasgow guy, wee tough Glasgow guy. He's sober 30 odd years. And when he hears me, I trigger him. He's got a resentment against me, but he's not got a program. So there you go. What is it? When I start talking about the 2 days situation, and it's in the book, it's in the book. Wee Jimmy pipes up, yeah, that's microwave recovery, yeah, express train to heaven. You need it, Jimmy. But there you go. He's 30 odd years sober. So what can you say? But he's not sober. Because it's angry what he said. Wow. And that kind of, that's part of my experience in meeting that kind of stuff and dealing with it. There's a couple of occasions where he wanted to fight with me. Actually, we had a meeting. We have a meeting, topic discussion meeting, best meeting I've been to. Topic, and he came up to the meeting because we changed the meeting. It was slight revolution in one respect. And he came up with these young black men, and he announced that he had come up to close the meeting. Oh yeah, we've got to shut this meeting down. Why is that? And I can't remember what he said, but believe it or not, this actually happened. Swear on my life, you know. This guy actually walked in with this other young character. When I say young, he was in his 40s, and both Scottish, no doubt, probably Glaswegian. I know Jimmy is. And that was just astonishing. And there was a stand-up confrontation between me and him because I wasn't having that. And the secretary of the meeting was a woman, but she worked in a bar. Alcoholic worked in a bar. Having, so she sorted them out, just hustled them out. They don't get out of here, you idiot. And that's the kind of people I bump into who want to assault me. And it's not funny. It's not good. It's not good that these people prevail. And he has a position in the meeting. He has a position in this meeting, and quite a responsible position. He's part of a group who decide who does the chair. You know those chairs that they do, where they talk mostly about their life and their drinking and the depressing stuff. And yeah, but thanks to God in this programme, I'm okay. Thanks very much. Good night. Just so depressing. And then when you point that out to them, they get angry, they get upset, they get resentful. All of those things that this programme's there is, they should welcome people like me because it gives them a chance to practice the programme. Oh dear, And to be fair, the nutters like Jimmy are few and far between, and yeah, there's been a couple. But I see, I've wandered off the point, haven't I, with my little stories. And we're talking about page 75. You're returning home having done all this stuff, and you're looking through it, you're satisfied, right, okay, fine. Step 6, for some of these resentments against people that you're not too happy about and you're not too willing, you've got step 7 prayer. Say that on a daily basis until it works out for you. And it will work out because you'll be practicing the program. So it will work out. Well, that's cool. Steps 8 and 9. This is me looking at it. Yeah. I'm not doing anything. I'm looking at it. Steps 8 and 9. Faith without works is dead. So step 8, how does step 8 go again? I've forgotten how step 8 goes. Step 8 and step 9 together. Step 8 and step 9. Have a list of people we have harmed. Step 8. We've done it when we took inventory. The number of people who talk about practice in step 8, I point out to them that you can't practice step 8. It's stupidity, nothing else. I don't think I use that word because they're so sensitive, but that causes arguments as well. We're telling people how to do their program. Well, it's not their program. It's AA's program. If you allow people to keep interpreting it their way, then you end up with a complete mess. Complete absolute mess. Which is what they've got, a complete mess. So there you go. Yeah, I've done it when I took inventory. So I've got the list in step 4 when I took inventory, exactly what they say. And of course I've got that list of people I've harmed. All right. So step 9 is about willing to go off. You go, well, it's not about willing, you already decided. And there you go. And this, I think there's about 3 pages on step 9. Pretty important stuff. But you do it with the guidance of the man. You don't just go rushing off. Do it with the guidance of the man. And because you can cause some damage in your desire, and naivety. But there you go. It's the first 9 steps. Goodness gracious knows how long that took. Was it too long? I'm not even sure I meant to do it. But there you go. I just love talking about this stuff. So, step 9, page 80. It's page 86 or something. The different volumes I've got now. Editions, fourth edition. Why did they need to change? What could they possibly add to the first edition? And this is possibly where all this problem started, by giving it a second edition in the 50s. Why did it need a second edition? Why didn't it need a third edition? Just to refresh the stories. But it's all about the pioneers. You can't refresh their stories. Or to bring us up to modern times. Alkies are alkies, doesn't matter what time you're in. But it's all the same symptoms. So what you talk, this is where it starts. This is where the human beings start to get hold of it and start to screw it up and start to dilute the message. All right, okay, fair enough. I do get a bit agitated with some of this stuff because it upsets me. It upsets me. And I'll give you one of the most profound examples I have. This wee woman was in a treatment centre and she was struggling. So the guy who ran the treatment centre gave her my number. So she came up to my house and was taking her through the steps. Oh, men for men, women for women. Yeah, there you go. You look at the logistics of that. There's not that many women, there's loads of men, so you're not going to find too many women sponsors. Sponsors is a word I hate. It's a word I hate. I had a run in with St. Paul and his apostles regarding that. That's another story. St. Paul and his apostles. And so this wee woman come up to my house. So, had a wee chat. Lunch. Came to step 4 and talking about some stuff. And there was one point where she was quite upset. I said, well, what's going on? Well, I've got a bit of confusion regarding this, my father. I resented my father, but you shouldn't resent your father, should you? Why do you resent him? Why sexual abuse when he was a child? She says, right, okay. That's wrong, isn't it? Oh, yeah. He shouldn't have done it. He should have been prosecuted for it. He should have been put in prison for it. And the guy is not a nice guy, to put it mildly. And she started crying. Oh, God, John, you've stuck your foot in it here. What have you done here, John? And I said, what are you getting upset about? Upset about? She says, well, why are you crying? She says, I'm crying with relief and happiness. What, talking about your father who abused you? She says, no, that's not a point. As you know, I've recently relapsed. And the reason why I relapsed is because my so-called sponsor, damnable people, in the main, he told me that because I resented my father, I'd have to make amends to my father. That's shocking, can that be? And that's prevalent. That if you resent somebody, you have to go and make amends to them. Doesn't matter what it is. Not a chance. Please let me repeat that. Not a chance. There are resentments which are totally justifiable. Totally justifiable. You get a guy whose kid was killed by a drunk driver. He's going to resent the drunk drivers. He's going to resent, and he's not going to go and make amends to the drunk drivers for resenting them. Just insane. But the number of people who believe that's what you've got to do with that stuff is so narrow-minded. So narrow-minded. Aren't I surprised again there's so many arguments, is it? With all this ignorance floating about. But that was a huge joy to get that wee woman through that. Huge joy. I really, blew me away. Imagine somebody telling her that. And I think it highlighted to me there and then about these so-called sponsors. I had a couple. One was a mad Irishman. The second guy was a moderate, nice, sensible guy, and who met me. And I managed to tell him what I thought about the situation. He wasn't happy, quite angry, even quite angry, which is uh, illustrates whatever it illustrates. But this well-mannered guy getting really quite angry because I was knocking at the foundations of what he was saying. What he was saying was wrong. He said a lot of good stuff, but what he was saying was wrong. And it's worth repeating one of the good things he said. You see, I start doing this stuff and then I start remembering things, and it's worth it. Trevor from Barnet, he was an accountant, had a nice big house on Potter's Bar and owned the BMW. I wanted all of that. So I had Trevor as my sponsor. And he said, and it was difficult what he was doing, these sheets and things, It wasn't simple, subsections and all that. No, he understood it because he was an accountant. But what he forgot, and most of them forget, you're dealing with an adult child here. Assume it's an adult child. That's what they done. You must assume it's an adult child. For safety's sake, and I was an adult child, trust me. And I sat with him one night and they said he gave stuff. He gave me Joan Charity to borrow. I don't think I ever got the bike. So it's to my, that was okay. And he sent me away to do, I don't know, I think he sent me away to do my step 4 or something like that. But I felt totally abandoned. I felt, what? You've got, is that it? Yeah, right. You phone me, I won't phone you. Immediate rejection. Didn't make it clear as to why. Didn't understand the adult child syndrome point because he was mature and maybe forgot where he was coming from. I try not to do that. But he said something to me once, and I think he phoned me, interestingly enough, but only to, did I leave? Did you leave something? Did, whatever. And he said, you sound a bit upset, John. You sound a bit tetchy. I said, well, yeah, now that you ask. Now that you ask. This was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I brought the children home from school, between 4 and 5. My beautiful little daughters at that time, who are now in their 30s. Beautiful memories. Beautiful memories. That's another bonus of this. There are some really good stuff in gratitudes. I've got a fucking mind full of gratitudes. I can go and dig out my gratitudes anytime I want to just brighten me up. Yeah, you sound a wee bit upset. Oh, yeah, now that you ask, 5 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever it was, a guy called me up this morning when I was taking the kids to school. 9 o'clock, 8:30. Oh, yeah. He never got you up, John. I thought he's misheard me. So, oh, yeah, he cut me up this morning taking the kids to school. Yeah, but he never cut you up, John. I said, what do you mean he never cut me up? And I was getting angry by this time. As we do. He cut a car up, John. Bang. He cut a car up. But I needed a bit more. But it was a bang moment. He cut a car up, John. He didn't know you were driving it. He didn't cut you up. Guy could have been in a rush last morning at work for being late. Could have been dashing off to the hospital. Could have been a few reasons. He could have just been an ignorant slob and that's it. Or just totally wound up because of the traffic situation, as most people do in London. I was a psychopath driving in London. I had to pass every motor. Every car in front of me was a challenge. And I was a driving instructor. And I had my kids in the car and my wife in the car. And you've got to ask, why did you put up with that? That's another story. And that blew me away. That just totally blew me away. I think that was my first spiritual experience. He's right. How do I know? I don't know. I'm making assumptions, all of that stuff. I stopped doing it. And it must have made a hell of a difference. The kids, the wife, she never said it. I now understand why she didn't say it. You know, now I understand why. And so that was fascinating. And that poor wee woman who was told she had to make amends to. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And so that brings us up to page 86, I think. And maybe I've covered this before, but we'll do it again. No harm in doing it again. About the promises. You know, the promises. You'll be amazed before you're halfway through. You're going to know when your happiness. Da, da, da. And it was that one promise. You will intuitively know how to handle things that used to baffle you. Or is it we will intuitively know? Or are they including us in it now? We will know. No, listen, they're telling you will intuitively know how to handle things that used to baffle you. Which is true. I love the word intuitive, but I didn't know what it meant. By the time I got home, I forgot about it, whatever, so I just didn't know what intuitive meant. I now know, in its simplest terms, it's like riding a bike. You do it that often, it just becomes natural. And this is what they're saying in these promises, that I will intuitively know how to handle things that used to baffle me, which is absolutely true. I've pretty good example yesterday, but I've given you enough examples. But I ended up with a handshake, and that was it. Communication could have been the opposite. From the old me, it would have been, should have done this, you should have done that. Why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you beat yourself up stuff? The exact opposite. End up shaking hands. And in communication. So intuitively, wow, that's it. I'm riding a bike if I keep doing it. So what they're saying is, if you practice 10 11, it will become intuitive. Oh, right. Continue taking when we're wrong, promptly admit it. Personal inventory now. It's like a diary. The man suggested I lay it out the same way as I laid out my step 4 inventory because that's pretty thorough. 3 columns to look at what they done to us, 3 columns to look at what we done to them, why we deserve this reaction, working it out. A wonderful experience. Never once will say it again. Wonderful experience. And it's all simple. It's all simple. An adult child like me, I could do it. And I looked forward to it when I saw it all coming together. I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more. That's remarkable. That's remarkable. So it becomes intuitive. Continue to take inventory, and when we're wrong, properly admit it. And it's all in the book. If you wish to check up on me. Right, step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. His will for us. Us. So that's it. I'm praying only for knowledge of His will for us. Sought through meditation. Prayer, okay, fine. Brought up a Catholic, so I know what prayer is. And meditation, I wasn't happy meditating. Just sitting there thinking or humming and chanting and bouncing about in mattresses or whatever it is, I was totally not with that at all. Until I realised to meditate, to think deeply, that's reasonable, isn't it? Alcoholics are the best meditators on the planet because they think deeply all the time. Rarely are they not thinking deeply. Well, the only time they're not thinking deeply is when they're drunk. Interesting. Alcoholics think deeply about the negative. That's why they have to go and drink, as it says in the book. The problem with the alcoholic starts in the alcoholic's mind. Wow, and here it is. Here's the proof of it. Hold on a minute. A slight interruption, actually. It's stream. No, we'll just go in with that. Sorry about that. We have no control over what happens outside. So we intuitively know alcoholics, seriously negative thinkers, change that thinking round to positive thinking on a nightly basis with your step 4. Take your own inventory. Make sure you do your gratitude list at the end of it. That's you doing it, and you will eventually start thinking the opposite of negative. It will be positives in your life, and you'll have a record of it. Any business that doesn't take inventory goes bust. That's so true. So true. So this is how we keep, this is our inventory, so that we don't go bust. Ultimately, step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we practice these principles and try and help others. That's it. Job done. Good luck. Follow the clear, precise instructions, and I'll go off and see what that little business was outside. Yeah, so if you hear what I'm saying, fine. If you don't, do us all a favour and just ignore me. Have a good life.